The dust had barely settled on Jake Morrison's boots when he first saw her standing in the doorway of the weathered farmhouse. 3 months had passed since her husband died, thrown from a spooked horse during a summer storm, and the whole county knew Martha Henderson was struggling to keep the ranch running alone. Jake had been drifting through Colorado for the better part of a year, taking odd jobs where he could find them, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. At 32, he'd grown comfortable with the loneliness of the open range, preferring the company of cattle and sky to the complications that came with getting too close to people. But when he'd heard in town that the Henderson place needed help with the fall roundup, something made him ride out there despite his usual instinct to keep moving. She was younger than he expected, maybe 27 or 28, with dark hair pulled back in a simple braid and eyes that held both strength and sorrow. She wore a faded calico dress and an apron dusted with flour, and she studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You the ranch hand from town?" Her voice was steady, businesslike. "Yes, ma'am. Jake Morrison. Heard you might need help bringing the herd down before winter sets in." Martha nodded slowly, her gaze assessing him the way she might evaluate a horse at auction. "Pays not much. Room and board, plus $20 a month. Works hard, and there's a lot of it. My husband let things slide the last year when he was sick." Jake noticed how she caught herself, how she still couldn't quite say it directly. "That'll do fine, ma'am. I'm not particular about fancy accommodations." She showed him to the bunkhouse, a small structure behind the main barn that smelled of old leather and pine. Over the following weeks, Jake threw himself into the work with a dedication that surprised even him. He repaired fences that had been neglected for seasons, reshod horses, cleared brush from the grazing lands, and began the slow process of bringing order back to a ranch that had slipped toward chaos in the wake of tragedy. Martha kept her distance at first, appearing only to deliver meals or discuss the day's tasks. But gradually, as the work progressed and Jake proved himself reliable, the walls between them began to thin. She started lingering after bringing his dinner, asking his opinion on which cattle to sell, which fields to let lie fallow. He found himself looking forward to these conversations, to the way her face softened when she talked about the land, about the dreams she and her husband had shared for this place. One evening in late October, as the first real cold began creeping down from the mountains, Jake was working late in the barn, mending tack by lamplight. He heard the barn door creak open and looked up to find Martha standing there, wrapped in a shawl against the chill. She carried a pot of coffee and 2 tin cups. "Thought you might want something warm," she said, setting the pot on a workbench. They sat together on hay bales, sipping coffee and talking about nothing and everything. She told him about growing up in Kansas, about meeting Thomas Henderson at a church social and following him west with stars in her eyes and hope in her heart. He told her about his own wandering, about the restlessness that had driven him from town to town, ranch to ranch, never quite finding a place that felt like home. "Don't you get lonely?" she asked, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But staying put can be lonely too, I reckon. At least when you're moving, you can tell yourself the next place might be different." "And is it? Different?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and felt something shift in his chest. "This place is?" The air between them grew heavy with unspoken things. Martha stood abruptly, gathering the coffee pot. "I should let you get back to your work. Good night, Jake." "Good night, ma'am." As November deepened, an unexpected warmth grew between them despite the winter cold. They worked side by side more often now, Martha helping with tasks she'd once left entirely to hired hands. Jake found himself making excuses to stop by the main house, to fix a loose shutter or check the fireplace flue. They were circling each other like cautious animals, both aware of the attraction building between them, both uncertain how to navigate the complicated terrain of her grief and his transience. The night it all changed arrived with the first real snow of the season. Jake had been checking on the horses when the storm blew in fast and fierce, reducing visibility to almost nothing within minutes. He made it back to the bunkhouse soaked and shivering, his teeth chattering as he tried to get a fire started with numb fingers. A knock on the door startled him. Martha stood there, snow swirling around her, a lantern in one hand and blankets draped over her arm. "The stove in here is useless," she said, pushing past him into the small room. "You'll freeze to death tonight. Gather your things and come up to the house." "Ma'am, I don't think—" "I'm not asking, Jake. I'm not having your death on my conscience because you were too proud to accept shelter." He followed her through the blinding snow to the main house, where warmth and the smell of stew greeted them. She showed him to a small bedroom off the kitchen, what must have been a hired hand's room in better days when the ranch had employed more people. "There's clean blankets on the bed and towels if you want to wash up. Dinner's in an hour." They ate together at the kitchen table, the wind howling outside and rattling the windows. The isolation of the storm seemed to strip away the careful formality they maintained. They talked more freely than ever before, laughing at shared stories, falling into comfortable silences that felt natural rather than awkward. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth. Martha poured them each a small glass of whiskey from a bottle she said had been her husband's, kept for special occasions. "I haven't had company like this in so long," she said softly, staring into the flames. "I'd forgotten what it feels like to not be alone." "You've been handling everything so well," Jake said. "The ranch, the loneliness, all of it. You're stronger than you know." She turned to look at him, her eyes glistening. "I'm not strong, Jake. I'm barely holding on. Some days the only thing that keeps me going is knowing the animals need feeding, that the work has to get done. Without that—" She trailed off, shaking her head. He wanted to reach for her, to offer comfort, but he held back, unsure of his welcome. "You should know," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I've felt something these past weeks. Something I shouldn't feel, not this soon, not when Thomas has barely been gone 6 months. She took a shaky breath. "But I can't help it. When you're near, I feel alive again. When you're not, the house feels emptier than it ever did before." Jake's heart was pounding. "Martha, please let me finish." She set down her glass and stood, moving to the window where she could see nothing but darkness and snow. "I know you're not a staying man. I know that come spring, you'll get that restless look in your eyes and you'll move on to the next place, the next job. And I know I shouldn't ask for more than what we have now. But I need to know something, Jake. I need to know if what I'm feeling is just loneliness and grief playing tricks on me, or if there's something real here." She turned to face him then, and in the firelight he could see tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hands moved to the top button of her dress, trembling slightly. "Will you stay if I undress?" The question came out as a whisper, raw with vulnerability and need. "Will you stay the night, hold me, let me feel like a woman again instead of just a widow going through the motions? And will you stay tomorrow, and the day after that, or will this just be another stop on your endless road?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Jake stood slowly, crossing the space between them. He gently moved her hands away from the buttons and held them in his own. "Martha, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "I won't lie to you. I've never stayed anywhere for long. Never wanted to. Never saw the point in planting roots when the ground always seemed to shift beneath me. But standing here now, looking at you, I realize something." He paused, searching for the right words. "I wasn't running towards something all those years. I was running away. Running from the fear of caring too much, of letting someone matter enough to hurt me." He raised one hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "You asked if I'll stay? The truth is, I've been staying already, in all the ways that matter. Every fence I fixed, I was building something that might last. Every time I made plans for spring planting or thought about which calves to keep for breeding, I was imagining a future here. With you." Martha's breath caught. "But what about Thomas? What about?" "Thomas is gone, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry you lost him, sorry you've carried this burden alone. But being faithful to his memory doesn't mean shutting yourself off from living. It doesn't mean you have to be alone forever." She searched his face, looking for certainty in a world that had given her precious little of it. "I'm scared, Jake. Scared of what people will say. Scared of dishonoring his memory. But mostly scared that if I let myself feel this, if I let myself lean on you, you'll disappear like morning fog and I'll be even more broken than before. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you. I can't promise I won't sometimes get that wandering feeling, won't look at the horizon and wonder what's beyond it. But I can promise that if you'll have me, I'll fight that feeling. I'll choose this place, this life, you, over and over again. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while the storm raged outside. Finally, Martha pulled back just enough to look up at him. Stay with me tonight, she said. Not because of loneliness or grief, but because I choose you too. I choose whatever this is between us, whatever it might become. He nodded, and she led him upstairs to her bedroom, to the bed she'd once shared with her husband. But this wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about two wounded people finding unexpected solace in each other, about choosing hope over fear, connection over isolation. That night, as snow piled against the windows and the wind howled its fury, Jake Morrison stopped running. And Martha Henderson stopped merely surviving. They held each other in the darkness, neither sure what the future would bring, but both willing to face it together. When morning came, Jake was still there. And the next morning, and the one after that. The town talked, of course, scandalized by the widow who took up with the drifter so soon after her husband's death. But Martha had spent enough time worrying about other people's opinions. She'd found something precious in the aftermath of loss, and she wasn't letting it go. Spring came eventually, as it always does. Jake felt the familiar pull toward the horizon, but this time he also felt the deeper pull of home, of belonging, of love that had grown from whispered vulnerability into something solid and real. He stayed. They married quietly that summer and worked the ranch together, building the dreams Martha and Thomas had started into something new and their own. Years later, when people asked how they found each other, Martha would smile and say something about fate and timing. But Jake knew the truth. Sometimes it takes someone brave enough to bare their soul, to ask the impossible question, to make a drifter finally understand what he's been searching for all along.